Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Andrew Hyatt. The session you're attending is the changes in residential architecture that will impact lighting. As I said, Andrew Hyatt, I'm the Director of Sales and Operations for Intertek. Intertek has been a long time supporter of ALA and lighting customers globally. Following the mantra of one of our founding fathers, Thomas Edison, I figure out what the world needs, then I proceed to invent it. Intertek works alongside lighting manufacturers to help get their products safety certified in North America with our ETL mark or international certifications. We also do performance testing to test the product's durability, energy efficiency testing and certifications to meet the different requirements like Design Light Consortium, Energy Star, or CEC. We also do EMC testing that helps with FCC and other international requirements. With the emergence of connected products, we provide cybersecurity testing to help with the several industry standards that are out there. Well, that's enough from our sponsor. Now off to the main event. Before Jeff retired, he was a long-standing corporate director, education and industry trends for Kichler Lighting. In 1974, while studying architecture, he began his career in residential lighting. Chiefly concerned with engineering for 25 years, he was also involved in many other facets of the lighting business. Jeff lectures to professional organizations and has also authored a number of articles regarding lighting for trade publications and consumer magazines. In 2015, Jeff was named Manufacturer's Pillar of Industry for ALA. Please welcome Jeff Dross.
Well, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Hopefully you can see my introductory slide. So as Andrew mentioned, we're going to talk about changes in residential architecture that impact lighting. And I think it's important to kind of understand this, or from the preface of why we're talking about this. Architecture basically informs us and helps us understand the lighting that is going to be required as we move into the future. So if you step back just a few years, you might remember that we moved from an 8-foot standard ceiling height to 9-foot, 10-foot ceilings. And what that did to the lighting industry, it told us that we needed to develop taller chandeliers. We needed more semi-flush fixtures. We needed more recessed fixtures because the ceiling was, of course, further away from the work surfaces, so that required more lighting. We started using architecture started using taller front doors. And what that meant that the outdoor lighting needed to be stretched. It needed to be a taller product. 2-story foyers, which were very popular for a lot of years, started to disappear, especially in certain geographic areas. And that, of course, then eliminated the need for some of those very large foyer chandeliers that we were building. Larger showers meant that we had to start bringing some lighting into the shower, where we had not done that before, when it was simply a bathtub with a shower head. There have been advances in backsplash design and a lot of dollars spent in backsplash design, which then, of course, required us to bring more under cabinet lighting. And we are now in a world where we have a growing and ever increasing aging population. And that, of course, is requiring us to bring more light into the home and in concert with that, lighting with less glare. So, lighting was fine. It was minding its own business. And then, bam, those changes occurred. So it forced us to almost immediately say, I need to recalculate the amount of cans. I need to understand which lighting manufacturers are providing taller products. Why am I not selling quite as many flush units? And of course, glare was never really that much of a concern. So let's be prepared this time. Let's understand what that buyer who that buyer is. Let's understand the changes that are occurring. Let's understand how those changes and what those changes mean to the buyer, and figure out how we can look for good product. If we figure out what's going on in architecture, it allows us then to understand the lighting needs that are required. If we understand the emerging tech, if we understand the socioeconomic changes that are occurring, it allows us to come up with the lighting solution. So with that, today, what we're going to discuss, we're going to get a little bit, just to kind of get us started, we're going to talk a little bit about some demographics. We're going to understand those boomers, Gen X, millennials specifically, Then we'll talk about a touch about home construction. So who's buying what? Which of these categories are buying what type of homes? And then we'll talk about some of the home interior information. I've got a number of things listed here. We'll kind of jump into those as we get there. We'll go outside as well, and we'll understand some of those changes that are occurring outside that are going to have an impact on our way of selling lighting or our way of specifying or helping customers buy lighting. And then we'll, of course, talk about some of those, some residual things that are kind of overarching, such as universal design and designing homes for climate change. And I'll just give you a quick residential lighting update. So we'll start pretty quickly here with demographic information. And just as a way of letting you know, there is a question box underneath there. If you have a question, won't be able to answer it as we're going through this presentation, but they will be reading these things and they'll kind of cull through those and try to come up with some questions at the end of the presentation. So with demographics, these are pretty much the groups of people who are alive right now in the areas that, and the demographic sectors that they are broken into. There, just so you are aware, there is a little bit of fluidity and range in some of these. So you'll look at some statistics from certain organizations, and they will be off a year or two. And especially in this Gen Z group of folks, there's some question as to when that demographic group ends. But just these are the numbers that I'm going to use. So we'll start off with the baby boomers. Right now, the baby boomers control over 53% of the wealth in the United States. They're retiring at a rate of 10,000 per day. And they are, at this point, reinventing the way that we retire, the way the people retire. They are not retiring in the same way that they had in the past. They're actively preparing homes for age-in-place use. And this generation is spending their money. It's not like the previous generations that had retired. This generation is active, is creating a much more active retirement. They want age-in-place fixtures. They want more windows. They know they need more light. First floor bedrooms are becoming a very big factor. There are currently 40% of the boomers now have a first floor bedroom, and that is a 15% increase from previous information that came from the NAHBA. They want larger bathrooms. And the thing that's interesting is that this is obviously a very large group, but unfortunately, we all have to pass from this place on Earth, and they are going to be disappearing. 10.5 million of these boomers are going to be leaving the housing market in the 2016 to 2026 era. Gen X is the next generation. This is the smallest demographic sector that people study, but they, at this point, now control 25% of the wealth in the United States. So this is a very large group with an outsized control of wealth. And they are currently in the midst of peak earning years. They are moving into leadership positions in companies all across the country. What's interesting, now, of course, these are all general statements and things that I have unearthed over the years, but in general, they are much more traditional. They have much more traditional preferences. It doesn't mean that there aren't some Xers who are looking for more contemporary designs, but in general, they are a little bit more traditional in their preference for goods and products. So they are now spending the most amount of money on homes. They're buying the largest sector of homes. This small population, as I said, really controls a large amount. There is some concern that by 2035, there are some concerns that Social Security may not have enough dollars available. So it could place them into a very vulnerable place right at the point in time when they're ready to start that retirement process. So it's something that they have to concern themselves with. Millennials run from 1980 to at the end of the 1900s, 1999. This is a very large group. This is the largest demographic group right now, but they unfortunately at this point only control 4.6% of the wealth in the United States. This is substantially smaller. So if you look at boomers, you step back and understand what boomers were, at what value they had in the country when they were this age, they controlled 21% of the wealth. And so because of that huge shift from 21% now down to 4.6, there is some question as to whether or not this generation is ever going to achieve the financial successes that the previous generations have. And there is some belief that this is going to be the first generation that will not exceed the value and the import of their predecessors. Right now, home ownership is there. It is starting, but it is a very slow start. They're definitely buying homes, but they are likely, and they're more likely to be reimagining older neighborhoods than coming into the new home construction era. They're relying on YouTube to do their own maintenance, and there is some question at this point as to whether or not they're going to be able to move into that second house. So they have that first house, that starter house, what all of us kind of thought was a starter house. There's some belief that that starter house might in fact turn into a permanent place for a very large percentage of this population. And then of course, Gen Z, which is 2000 to 2020, which is last year, of course, very young. They at this point control a very minimal amount of the wealth in the United States. However, they have made some very significant impacts in consumer goods purchases in their younger years, probably more so than previous generations have. And because of that, there is some belief that they're going to become a very potent home products buyer at that time. It's a group similar in size to Gen X, so it's a little bit smaller of a group. Minimal household starts. I think this is kind of an interesting fact and perhaps especially scary fact for those boomers like me and some extras out there, that by 2040, 18 years from now, the workforce will be almost completely filled with millennials and Zs. So it'll be a 50-50 shift. That means there is definitive change here coming. Homeownership is in fact something that is desired, but it's really a little too early to understand their impact in that business. As far as racial makeup is concerned, you can see there's a decided shift away from a primarily white population. So boomers are 72% white, and that is going to shift down here to 51%. So almost half, or just 1% over half, will be white in this Gen Z. And you can see there's a very large increase in the Hispanic population. So your customer base is going to be shifting very slowly to a little bit more of a heavier Hispanic consumer, and away from that white consumer. There is a very subtle amount of growth in the African American and the Asian populations that are going to be buyers. So the biggest shift is there's going to be a reduction in white consumers and an increase in Hispanic consumers. As far as our breakup between male and female, there are a couple of generalities that have been pretty well accepted and seem to be holding true. Males are becoming more and more active in the purchase of that home and all of the things that go inside the home. If you go back to these, the earlier generations, the silent generation, the greatest generation, this was primarily a female-based concern, and now is very much shared by with the male. There is a growing percentage of men who are now becoming the primary cooking partner in a relationship. They're more inclined to upgrade to a product with added features, and they're more inclined to adopt to technology in almost all aspects of the house. Again, generalities here, females are a little bit more brand conscious. They're more likely to start looking for a bargain, and they are much more likely to shop longer for a product. What's interesting here is that they are then also less dedicated to a specific store or a salesperson. So as retailers, there needs to be some, I think that has to be a little bit of a concern and something that you might want to think about. How am I going to create some loyalty by that salesperson, by that female buyer? So now that we've looked at these, how do they fit together? How do they piece together with this puzzle on lighting? So when we start thinking about these boomers, are we conversant on the needs of that boomer population? They definitely do not want to move out of the house. There's an adverse reaction to moving to retirement complexes. So they're looking for elements in their house, and they're willing to spend money to add elements into the house that are going to allow them to age in place. So are we conversant on age in place? Are we conversant on universal design? Are we conversant on what is a non-glare situation? Do you have products and selections ready for them? Because this, as I indicated, with a 53% hold on wealth, they are a powerful consumer base and will continue to be for the next 10 to 15, maybe even into 20 years from now. Gen Xers and Ys, are you doing things that are going to attract them? Are you giving them a reason to move into their store as opposed to buying it on the internet and opposed to buying it from specialty retailers, which are very, very attractive to this demographic group? So these basically room in a box stores like Room and Board and Z Gallery and Our House and a number of others. You can walk into those stores, you can buy the furniture, you can buy the tables, you can buy the floor coverings, you can buy the window dressings, and you can buy the lighting. Basically, everything's in a box, just come and deliver it to my house. These customers are going to be growing. So as that boomer population starts declining, these guys are going to continue to go up, and there has to be a reason for them to come to your establishment to purchase product. So let's take a real fast look at what type of homes are sold based on some of the real estate people in NAHB. 15% are new construction, 85% are previously owned. So we have to understand those different size and configurations of a lot more older homes than new homes. 81% are single family, 7% townhomes, and townhomes just in general are starting to increase in the quantity sold. 5% condo, and then other living options are available. So who's buying these homes? This is, I think, really an interesting, the National Association of Realtors, they find that the baby boomers and the millennials are so large, they've divided them into older and younger boomers. So if you look here, the Gen X right now is buying the most amount of homes just on a demographic. But if you combine the boomers older and new, that's 34%. And if you combine millennials, that's actually 37%. So millennials in general are buying more. 1/2 of the millennials is almost buying as many homes as Gen Xers. So understand that these are the folks that are purchasing new homes and are likely to be in the market for lighting. The amount of dollars that are being spent on homes, Gen X's, as I indicated earlier, they're spending the most amount of dollars, but older millennials are coming in second, even more so than the younger baby boomers. So again, they're spending more dollars. They realize that they're going to be around in that home for a little bit longer. They're willing to spend those dollars for that home. And you can see the median prices are real similar. So there are some subsection stats that are provided. 3 to 5% are going to be in the LGBTQ community, 1% transgender. Now, the Hispanic population, because of its rapid growth, it is in that boomer generation very small, and it's getting larger as it moves into those Z generations. So you're getting a very wide range of buying in that community. African American, not quite as wide as Hispanic, but 2 to 8%, and the Asian Pacific Islander community at that 2 to 7%. So there's a pretty large spread when you move away from that white demographic. And then education, kind of right here in the middle, these bachelor's, master degree, post high school degree communities are going to be your more likely home buyer. The average size of a home that they are buying is 1,900 square foot. And statistically, 24% believe that energy efficient lighting is very important. And they expect to stay in a home for 15 years. This is a little bit longer than the number that we had experienced in the past. So let's move now into some of these changes in the architecture that are going to be a concern for us as we attempt to provide lighting and help our customers provide lighting in the future. So this whole question about open floor plans versus what came up primarily because of our pandemic situation. Are we going to have more walls? Are we going to have less walls? So I've been reading a lot about this. I've been talking with a number of people, and what appears to be the situation right now is that the experts on this are very divided. Some see the end of the open floor plan. They see that we are going to be, they believe we're going to be going back to a little bit more compartmentalized. There are others that feel that it's not going to disappear, but they feel that there's going to be some adjustments that are going to be made. Either way, the important thing for you as someone who's going to try to put lighting into these spaces is that there's going to be some change. So we have to we pay attention to that. Homeowners have realized, and they've told experts and people who are taking surveys that they realize the benefit of that private space. Kind of like the open floor plans in offices, they were thought to be wonderful ideas until people tried to make a phone call and they realized that the guy next to them talking about the last night's sports game was unfortunately preventing them from having a good phone call. So a lot of companies were, prior to the pandemic, moving back to some more individual offices because of that sound transmission. So you're going to have some of these changes in lighting because of that. So one of the things that I think we're gonna be seeing pop up in homes are this idea of movable walls. So you notice I've got these cartoons here that are indicating a shift in the position in even the whole look of these rooms. So this particular wall hides a complete bookcase and can be shifted over. You can turn it into two offices, one room. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, you can see where that entire office just hides behind a wall when it's time to close the office for the day. And there's in the lower right-hand corner, you can see where they've configured an entire, almost an entire seated office with these movable walls. What this whole idea of movable walls does to us is it tells us that we need to be concerned with lighting. So we may see a little bit more illuminated panels. We might see more indirect light. We have to understand that hanging product is going to be problematic. So if you look at this bedroom, this bed here in the middle, tipping downward, and that wall moving out, you can see that wall would hit into some sort of a pendant if it were hanging over that. So we have to be careful with some of those lights and some of that placement. And we have to understand that lighting is going to be important on both sides of this configuration, whether or not that bed is up and the wall is in its place, or it's been tipped down. We still need to provide lighting to those areas. You can see over here that on the left, there's a movable wall that's going to close off the entire kitchen. And on the right, this is like really interesting. The bed is basically in the ceiling in this particular design. And what happens is the bed comes down and sits over the top of the seated area. So, hopefully somebody's not sitting there when you decide to bring the bed down. That could be a little bit of a fatal problem. Pocket doors are kind of growing in importance as well, but they're probably not going to be used necessarily as doors. they're going to be used a little bit more as a traditional way to close off a room or close a portion of the room off. Almost like a divider, which is the next section. These dividers are going to continue to grow in popularity because of our need for these segregated spaces in a house. So it helps us to create those separate spots, and they can be somewhat permanent. They can be somewhat airy, like you can see over here on the left side of the screen. This little white, almost like cloud-like divider. And then on the lower right hand, you can see almost a complete solid room that's been divided out. Now that is going to, of course, change the lighting. So when I'm going to divide a room, if I've got a divider in a room, I need to make certain that there's going to be an adequate amount of light for that room once it's divided and once it's open. So if it's divided, I need to have light in both sides of that divided space. And you can see that that has been done in this one pretty well. So we've got this divider right here in the middle of the room, a couple of buffet lamps on this counter on the other side of the room, a nice ceiling light and some sconces. So they've addressed lighting on both sides of this divider, which is exactly what you want to do. Flexible space. So, Forbes has recently written quite a bit about this new configuration of homes. And they believe that the single purpose room and furnishings are going away. Many homes are going to be available in multi-purpose rooms. And this is actually going to be a little bit more likely than the movable walls, probably as prevalent as dividers. So, if you look here, that you can offer a room in a home and it might be used with one client as an office. The second person is going to use it as a hobby room, and the third one's going to use it as a guest room. So these flexible spaces, it becomes important for us as lighting people to understand what they're going to do. If you're going to have an art studio in a room, you're going to need a heck of a lot less light than if that becomes a spa or a yoga room. We don't need to have anywhere near the amount of measurable light in order to achieve to do yoga successfully as we do if we're going to be working on very fine, detailed artwork. So these flex spaces are going to be really important for us to understand what the use of that particular room is going to be. Dual purpose rooms, I think, are also going to continue to grow. And if you look at these photographs, these are, I think, a really interesting dual purpose. So you have this craft or art section right here next to the washers and the dryers. So if this is in the same room, as you see here, we're going to have to make certain there's a concentration of light here at the craft area, because that customer is going to need additional light. If you look over here, this is a laundry room that is connected to some sort of a rec room or some sort of a living space. And by closing these doors, it just kind of looks like a cabinet once it's done. So the demands for light in that space are going to be completely different. When you're washing, you need some additional light. When you're sitting there watching a movie on the flat screen, maybe not as much. And the same thing here with sleeping and office work, which is a little bit more typical. You can see here, these are kind of really interesting dual spaces. So here we have a bed that's on kind of an elevated surface, a living area underneath, and then an office space over here, all in a relatively small, maybe 200, 300 square foot footprint. This office tucked here in the back hall. So we've got a back foyer with a mud space and hanging for racks for boots, right across the hallway from somebody who's going to be doing some work at this countertop. So again, a conflict of the use of that space. If this were simply a rear entry, a mud entry, back room, you wouldn't need a ton of light. But now that we're going to be doing some office work in this area, depending on the office work, we might want to make certain that there's some under cabinet lighting in there so that that area can be illuminated in an appropriate way for an office chore. I think this is probably one of the most interesting things I found as I was looking at these dual purpose. This is a dual purpose office and dining room. So I'm showing you the office because I think it's easy to understand how this will turn into a dining room. So the dining room table has been turned 90 degrees. There's a chair behind the desk, and then of course visitors' chairs in front. When this turns to use in the dining room, all they have to do is rotate this table 90 degrees and adjust the position of the chairs, and you have this really usable space. This is, I think, a real intelligent way to incorporate lighting that is going to service both of the needs of that dual purpose room. There's also, I think we're going to see a little bit more demand for functional footage. And, we've seen a little bit of this with these tiny homes and multi-purpose areas, but this is almost to the extreme. This is a very small apartment. I think this was in Japan, maybe it was in Hong Kong. Anyway, the point is that this whole step moves out. There's a bed that rolls out in here. This has 4 or 5 different configurations that can all be pulled out of these underside. This particular panel right here is the bed. So, when you've got all of the shelving pulled out, you can't have the bed down, and you have to pay attention to where that light is. So if you look at this light, it's hanging pretty high in the air. It's going to be a little bit lower when it's in certain areas. If you have these multifunction areas, it's important to pay attention to where that lighting is going to come. So home offices have turned into a real interest. No surprise, they are much more important than they were a year and a half ago to 2 years ago. This whole work from home concept is likely to continue, at least for the foreseeable future. Established office spaces are going to be an integral demand and want from customers. And it may not just be one. There may be a need for multiple office spaces because of spouses who may be working also. Or if not a spouse, perhaps there's going to be a lot more distance learning demands from children. So we want to make sure that we're doing those well. What we want to do here with home offices, we want to make sure that we place these desks in a way where the light is going to best be addressed. So we do not want the light to come in front of us or behind us. We've all probably been on a webinar or a Zoom meeting where somebody has a big window behind them and you can barely make out their face. It's best to have that window either off to the side in front or directly to the side in the other direction. So, directly on the side or in front of us to one side or the other. If you're going to be doing lighting for a video conference, the aim is the best way to do this is to aim light at the face at 45-degree angles. So you can see this upper right-hand image here where these lights are coming to the person at a 45-degree angle. That keeps a nice depth on the face, a good light on the face. Conversely, if we can't do two, there are a ton of these lights on the market that sit right over the top of the computer screen or wherever your camera happens to be. They can be rectangular, they can be round. The rectangular and round pieces are a little bit better than like a spotlight. What they do is they have a tendency to bring light to our face in a much more even manner. But again, no surprise, no lights from behind. That's not really what we're going to do. Expect that these home offices are going to be coming to us at a much more elevated level. We're not going to see this kind of a clinical office look that we used to see for years and years, a desk, a file cabinet, and an old chair in a spare bedroom. These are going to be reinvented to really look much more homey, much more interesting. They could be placed in unusual spots where you might not expect to see them in the past. Like, this is just this office is just kind of sitting in a hallway in a second story area and looks wonderful. It's got a nice little bookcase there and this tiny little table. There's not a ton of paper that we have to deal with any longer. So because of that, that laptop can fit on a lot of different flat surfaces. Remember when you're doing those to make sure that you've elevated the lighting. There should be some desk lighting because there is going to be work done at the desk that's non-computer related. If there's shelves behind, make sure you get some under cabinet lighting in those shelves. Remember, there needs to be some ambient light in the room. And again, there's going to be a higher level of aesthetics in these home offices. Time to make sure that your lighting is commensurate with that. Multiple master suites is kind of an interesting thing. I don't know that I had ever thought about this before until I started doing some research for this, but there is a growing demand for multiple master suites. In 2003, 25%, there was a 25% demand for it, and that's bumped up to a 40% demand for multiple master suites. And there's a number of reasons. In-law, multi-generational use, dual purchase of single homes. So depending on your geographic area, homes can be quite expensive. Having these dual masters and a shared home with two couples, it can be an interesting way to reduce dollars. And then this last thing, which is a growing percentage of the population of married couples are sleeping in separate rooms. They do that for a number of different reasons, according to the National Sleep Foundation. Better sleep, dissimilar habits. Somebody wakes up early and the other one wakes up late, and of course, just the need for more personal space. So you're going to be faced with dual masters, and we need to understand how, in fact, those are going to be used. Is it going to be a combination of a suite with the dressing areas, and are there dissimilar aesthetic demands in those particular spaces? What's the use of each of those? So you might be inclined in a single master suite to put lighting on each side of the bed so that both partners could read in bed. But if that's not the case with one master suite and it is with the other, you might have a different lighting approach. Quiet rooms are an interesting area. They had been featured primarily in workplace settings, but there are more and more of these that are kind of popping up into residential architecture. It provides this relaxation space, prayer space, reflection space. I actually did a lighting design for a client a little while ago, and I had to light a prayer area for this particular person or this couple. So you might see that type of situation in these quiet rooms. And now, again, because we have so much of an open floor plan in so many areas and so many homes, this kind of is a respite from that. There's also an additional need for this quiet room. We have an ever increasing percentage of the young population who are suffering from heightened sensory perception. So you probably are familiar with autism, Asperger's, ADHD. They just have this, they're unable or have a difficulty in processing sensory perceptions coming at them at a pretty significant rate. So they need a room that has minimal elements that allows them to decompress and feel much more comfortable. So with that, as we attempt to light some of these quiet rooms, we have to remember that these are going to be very neutral palettes. So we want to have no windows in this space or shaded, pretty heavily shaded windows. We want soft indirect light. Do not put recessed cans in these rooms. That overhead light is a distraction, is a sensory distraction. So that would not be a good thing to have. You might want to start thinking about, uplighted torchères. Those can be a little bit more acceptable. We have to make certain that we do not have lighting that has a flicker component. So, ask the suppliers, what is your percent flicker on that? And look for those very, very low percent flicker numbers. One of the easiest ways to avoid this flicker issue is to stay away from using replacement lamps, look for integrated lighting products, and stay away from a lot of the AC LED because they are more inclined. Doesn't mean that you cannot eliminate flicker from an AC LED, but it typically elevates the price. So these are good questions that you're going to have to ask luminaire suppliers to get some of these non-flicker LEDs. We thought we got rid of flicker when fluorescence came along. As we started moving into less expensive LED, the flicker came back in because in order to make those LED less expensive, we started removing some of those electronics that eliminated it. So no surprise, the kitchen is still king. Most recent NAHB survey basically said that the kitchen is going to be the only room that is going to increase in size for the foreseeable future. And there is, now this last survey was of course pre-pandemic. There is still a belief that that open kitchen was going to have some connectivity to the communal living space. And that's expected to stay. There may be a little bit of adjustment to that now that we're post-pandemic, but the last surveys are kind of indicating that openness is going to still be around. You're going to see some things that are going to change. I believe you're going to be seeing a little bit more white appliances. There is going to be a lot more concealed appliances. So those rooms are going to look a lot more finished, where you're not actually going to see the stove and the sink. Well, maybe the sink, but the refrigerators are going to kind of blend seamlessly into the wall. Quartz as a countertop appears to be continued, doesn't seem to have an end to it at this point. I was just in New York this last weekend and saw some beautiful hardwood countertops. There have always been some beautiful glass countertops, but they still are a relatively small percentage of the population. A lot of shelves as a place to, as opposed to upper cabinets, and that's going to have an impact. And of course, this move to natural or satin brass. This cabinetry that I talked about, what it basically means is that under cabinet lights are essentially going to be disappearing. There's no place to put an under cabinet light. We need to be more comfortable, more conscious, more receptive to this idea that we're going to be using LED tape as an under cabinet lighting, and we have to understand how that is going to be installed. We might need to router out a space under these shelves. We have to make sure that we understand the electrical flow. Where are we going to router that wire into the wall? What type of wiring is required in order to pass that product into the wall? The islands are going to continue to get bigger, and the lighting for that means that we are going to be getting taller, larger lighting. In the past, we would never have assumed that we could use two island lights. It was kind of we always had to make sure that we were using an uneven number of island lights. But because of the size, I've seen some really nice solutions using two island lights. So that those of you who are maybe familiar with that old rule, I think you're going to see that gets violated as the size and the height of these island lights start increasing. And the reason we're using these tall products is because the ceiling heights are so much taller. So if you look at these images, these are probably around 10-foot ceilings. And if we were to put those little tiny guys in these rooms, they would simply look out of place. We need to have that expanded height, and we need to have those larger diameters as well. So here, just again, even though this is about an 8, maybe 8.5 foot ceiling height, this is still works well with these taller pieces. And as we start trying to address the needs of an aging population, these solid shade products are now starting to grow in popularity, and you're going to get more and more demand for those because you're trying to reduce that glare that is being caused by glass pendants. I have been noticing a little bit of a trend where folks are hanging these pendants a little bit taller. So it seems as though they're doing that with these larger, denser, solid pieces, rather than the 36 inches from the countertop to the underside of the pendant. These are getting a little bit taller. This one over here, I think, is substantially taller. Probably has a lot to do with this window that's right next to the space. But you might need to play with the position, with the hanging position of these lights to accommodate the needs of the customer, to accommodate the needs of the architecture, such as you see in this picture in the right. But be careful with getting them up too high. They start looking a little out of place when they get too high up in the air. Sconces are growing and will continue to grow in need, and that is kind of a byproduct of this removal of upper cabinets. So as we remove these upper cabinets and replace them with shelves, there's oftentimes no place to put an under cabinet light, which is going to provide that needed supplemental light on the countertop. The other thing is, more bigger windows in kitchens, which means that we can't put a countertop. So we could put maybe a recessed light up there, but these sconces are kind of a nice solution to that. And then, of course, there are places where just under cabinet lights will not work. So this is, this picture here in the middle, I think is great. There's a nice 24-inch work surface on each side of the range, but of course, no light over that. So it's going to, these sconces that are located here right next to the exhaust vent are going to be able to bathe that area in light. You're going to be able to cut the specific things that are being prepared and pop them right into the oven or to the stovetop. Here, just this very, very wide, large open space where you have no under cabinet light possible. So putting these sconces there over the top help in that. And then this, large mirror wall that you can see in this particular house, pendants along that wall provide that needed light on that countertop surface. And here again, some sconces with those very large open spaces that can be where light can help and coming from those sconces. Expect a reduction in the amount of black in the kitchen and a rise in the natural brass. I'll get a little bit further into that in the future, but we are getting ready to return to an all brass world. Those of you who are a little bit older will know that brass was very popular for 40 years. And we're about ready to start that all over again. It's primarily a brass lighting products. Pantry rooms. So pantry rooms, it's no longer just that little closet in the back off the kitchen. There's a number of reasons why these pantries are growing in size. And kind of just went through kitchen architecture with you. You notice that that architecture is changing. So we're getting rid of those upper cabinets because we want to make that room look a little bit larger, but that then reduces the storage area. Open floor plans make the space much more visible. Maybe we don't want to see a can of pork and beans on the shelf in an open plan when we're sitting in the living area. So we are now using these much larger areas to store this, in addition to specialized cooking equipment. So if you just think back to the pieces of equipment that are in a kitchen now that were not even available 10 years ago, it's a huge quantity. It's a very large amount. So where am I going to store all that stuff? A pantry becomes that answer. So lots of interesting solutions. I kind of liken this to the older homes that used to have butler pantries. So the butler pantries, they were 10 foot tall, and there was storage from the top of the 10 foot to all the way down to the ground. They were a little bit more elevated, glass front, so you knew what was inside. But the whole point is that the lighting that we had used in pantries in the past is certainly not going to service the needs of the new pantry. We're going to need to come up with an elevated sense of how to illuminate these spaces. So there's just a couple of things. Obviously these are much more picture postcard looking, but putting light on the shelf, going up, a little bit of a collection of recess cans in the space so that all of that stuff is visible. And then under cabinet, under the shelf lighting in this one over here on the right, elevate the amount of light in those pantries to make sure that all of that stuff can be seen and pull it out for use. So let's move outside. What's happening outside? Of course, we have this expanded outdoor living, and that again is a byproduct of this pandemic fever that we're in the middle of. People have felt trapped inside. The natural reaction was to go outside for all types of things, eating, gathering, just playing. Nice way to still maintain that connection. Because of this pandemic, this Forbes survey that I talked to you about and pulled some of this information from basically said that 85% of the people they surveyed said they were going to invest more in their outdoor space, primarily because of this pandemic. It kind of forced them to reassess the use of their home, and there's a lot of space outside in most cases. 48% of the folks believe that they're going to put patios and porches in their house. 19% are looking at porches and decks. Sliding doors as a way to transition from that interior to exterior space. Upgrading some of these outdoor spaces with outdoor kitchens, fire pits, coverings over patios. And for those folks who live in cooler areas of the country, geographic areas, there's going to be a growth in space heaters in homes, residential space heating, fireplace pits, and then of course lighting comes along with that. Because we're going to be using more cooking outside, we need to understand how we're going to light that cooking area. We probably have had some pendants in the past, but this stone-built outdoor kitchen that you see right here has incorporated an under stone lighting that kind of washes all of that. If you open that little refrigerator, that light will allow you to see inside that refrigerator, and some of the shelving that's there. That under cabinet lighting is going to allow for that. So how are we going to light those cooking areas? There's a number of different solutions. So you can see here, if it's just a simple grill, that under cap lighting works. Here we've got almost like a collection of torchère type lights that are surrounding this cooking space. RLM, industrial wet location listed RLMs in this partially covered kitchen here. Here's a little barbecue light, pretty common landscape light solution that's going to probably get more demand than you found in the past. And then these backyard eating areas, these European kind of string lights have become really popular. They continue to sell and sell and sell in all types of venues. But going beyond that, I mean, you can see here, this is just a kind of galvanized steel pendants over this heating area. And these, where they're taking this exposed light bulb and covering it with a small cloth. The play areas that we've put in our backyard, they're going to continue to be illuminated. So you see a number of bocce courts here, which are illuminated from the edge, of putting green here, and even the toss game that has this is actually a unit that's sold. It's an illuminated toss game piece of equipment that allows you to figure out how you're gonna where your little bean bag is gonna fall. So a fire pit does in fact add light, but we also have to understand how we're going to transition from the residence to these conversation areas such as this. So portable lamps are going to continue to grow, but we have to make sure that we're understanding how we transition from living interior spaces to maybe some of these outdoor areas that are a little bit further away. And there's a number of ways that these are being done, can be just hardscape lighting built into the architecture. If it's small enough, something on the side of the structure is going to work fine. This, I think, is a neat solution. This is a completely open patio, but what they've done is they've included wet location RLMs on the posts aiming toward the house instead of on the house aiming out into the yard. And then, of course, these hanging lights, really interesting. These are plug-in outdoor pendants, so they can be strung up in trees. and illuminated and illuminate these living spaces. Casitas are growing in popularity as well. Kind of a smaller, self-contained building. We may know them under carriage homes, pool houses, mother-in-law suites. They can and often are a cohesive design, as you see here, but they could be something different. They're growing because seniors are moving away. They want to make sure that there's going to be a small place for relatives who come for extended visits, but also used within a family. So whether or not we have guests living there, could be a work from home situation where you can put your office in this little room. Studios are a really nice use. And that, of course, then allows the opportunity for us to light these. Landscape lighting is, the most obvious way for us to transition from the main home to the casita. But there's also going to be outdoor lighting opportunities. We have to understand how that casita is going to be used. Is there going to be a separate bedroom, kitchen? Is there a separate bathroom? Are we going to have to light all of those? How are we going to use them? Is it going to be an art studio, or is it going to be a retreat for a yoga? And of course, then light those appropriately. They come in all kinds of styles, all kinds of looks. So, somewhat traditional here in the upper left and very contemporary here right next to it in the lower left. Lots of different opportunities to light these. Winter gardens is kind of an interesting little idea. Kind of started years ago as a personal conservatory that allowed the home to have tropical plants. It eventually transitioned into the Crystal Palace in Hyde Park, London, which was an exhibit hall that had almost 1 million square foot of exhibit space. And these modern winter gardens are now kind of serving as a way for us to deal with the biophilic needs of humans. We want to have that light. We want to have that outdoor view. And it could be just a sitting area surrounding us with plants to get a really nice, good, solid, fresh air delivery. Lots of different options, lots of different styles. So you can see quite a contemporary piece over here with an oversized floor lamp, and then a dining room table in the middle of this much more traditional piece with a very large chandelier hanging there. And lots of different options, lots of different sizes that can be brought to this. And probably something that we also want to keep in the back of our mind is the fact that a ceiling fan in these winter gardens is probably a really good idea, because sometimes the air can and demands a lot more movement than we might have in there already. Pocket gardens continue to grow, and you're going to see more and more of them, primarily because of the shrinking lots that homes are being positioned at, in addition to the growth in townhomes. And because of that, what they do is we now have got these very small backyards or small gardens, and they're going to include plants and art and living space. There's going to be a considerable investment in these pocket gardens. Because of that, we should make certain that lighting is an important element in that pocket garden design. Very compact, so maybe there's an herb garden tucked into one of these corners, but basically this is a living environment, and we're going to spend, our clients are going to spend considerable amount of time in these spaces. We want to make sure that they look good and look nice, and we're going to light them well. A couple of garden trends just in general. The top garden trends, according to Home and Garden, is multiple levels. So gardens are not going to be just a flat surface. You're going to have multiple levels in the backyard. Lots of brick and mortar construction, bigger trees and shrubs. We're not going to try to find ways to shoo away the wildlife that might be in the neighborhood. So rather than trying to find deer resistant plants, we're going to want to welcome that wildlife, and a considerable amount of use of wood. A number of publications also have indicated that these tiny gardens that I kind of just went through are going to continue to grow. So I've found information in Country Living Veranda, but lots of other publications are essentially saying the same thing. excuse me, and these inside outside rooms. So we're going to make sure that those rooms look like they could be either inside the house or outside the house. Outdoor tech is always going to grow. Just like tech inside the house, we're going to see that tech in the outside. More audio, video, lighting, security, bringing Wi-Fi outside. If you're selling landscape lighting, a wonderful add-on is outdoor audio. It's essentially the same type of wiring, can be easily done, and it should. And of course now there's plenty of wireless options that are available. So this is a great thing to make sure that people use. As we bring these rooms outside, as we see more of these rooms that are that look like an interior room, there's a natural demand then for television or entertainment. I just did a quick survey of like an Amazon search. Virtually every major brand of television sells an outdoor rated flat screen. So these are going to become integral to outdoor rooms and if they already aren't, and there's a lot of them on the market right now, they are going to be more and more popular. Extending Wi-Fi. So we're going to be working from home. We want to bring that Wi-Fi outside so that we can have the entertainment, have the music, have the computer connection, and stay connected. And as we turn these rooms into more and more of a indoor look, we want to make sure that we're bringing that lighting along. So landscape lighting is, of course, a really wonderful solution that should be included. But regardless of that, we want to bring some of these elements like I'm showing you here. So this is actually a chandelier, outdoor chandelier on a floor lamp. But there's a kind of a more traditional floor lamp that is over here, a rattan covered portable on this little table. Outdoor lighting remains one of the top 10 most desired elements for consumers, according to the NAHB 2021 survey. So when you combine that with landscape lighting, it's going to expand beyond. And as we think about these outdoor rooms, we have to start thinking about the use of portable light. And you can see that there's all different types of portable light, from this kind of handheld battery operated one to some that are a little bit more wired in, as you see over here. And I think this is a wonderful thing. This is a European, just basically it's a big arch and the light is on the inside. And of course you put that over the top of the outdoor. So I'm not going to get too deep into tech, but I just want to remind everybody that tech in a home continues to grow. I think at one of the ALA conferences, we were asked to provide a quote on tech, and I said the smart home and home automation is inevitable. We may not see it today. It may not be top of mind in your customers tomorrow, but it is going to be. And with that, as that tech increases, you're going to see this room called a tech closet or a media closet or a wiring closet. It's this area that is going to turn into the brains of our home. Our computer networking is going to be set up in their security systems, home theater, audio and routers, hotspots. All of these are going to be put into this little tech closet. These are kind of just typical little examples. You can see that this particular room has got 16 GCOs built in. It has all of the phone jacks built onto the wall. It has all of the cord for the television, and they are there are these carriages that are designed to slide in and out of these closets. In this case, but most of them are going to be in an actual room. So we have to make sure that we're going to provide a lot of light in these spaces, because that is what there's going to be people working on small wires in these spaces. We might also need, and I've seen a number of recommendations from electricians out in the world, we might consider the use of a ceiling fan or an exhaust fan, a bathroom kind of fan, to just pull some of the heat out of these tech closets, just like we're using them in an exhaust situation in a bathroom, to pull some of that hot out of that room. You can see here from these images, these are small spaces. We're going to have to try to understand that. And I don't want to get too deep into this, but keep in mind that the more and more automation, the smarter our home becomes, the less important these switches are going to become in the future. Universal design, is basically allows everyone, regardless of age, size, and abilities, to function within that space. And that is going to continue to become an ever-growing part of what we're going to be demanding. The 7 principles of universal design are equitable use, flexibility use, simple, intuitive use, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and size and space approach for use. And with that, we have to understand that impact on lighting. So if we're going to have lower countertop heights, how are we going to address the amount of light needed for that lower countertop? Our lighting is essentially engineered for that 36-inch countertop. Now, if we move that down a foot, that means as you move it down a foot, you're going to have lower levels of light there. We might not have under cabinet lights. We probably need some alternate switching. And we need to have, need to make certain that we pay attention to recommended lumen levels. So if we think about that mirror, if we are, if we engineer our lighting to hit us at about eye level, when we are sitting, we're substantially lower. So how are we going to do that? You might need to think about using linear lighting so that that light is good, especially if there is someone who is going to use that mirror that has the ability to stand and doesn't and will not be sitting when they use that mirror for personal grooming. So these linear lights across each side of the mirror may be a good solution for that. We think about a shower. This shower is now going to be larger so that it's wheelchair accessible. Might need to include more lighting into that shower stall so that you can get that person into the shower stall in whatever type of sitting position that is required based on their impairment, and then pull that out and then make use of the shower. So might need more light there. Lighted bathroom mirrors are probably something that we're going to need to deal with. Are those mirrors going to be adjustable? So from the wall, if they tilt down a little bit, it's going to allow that seated person to use that mirror in a much more comfortable or convenient way. And wall switches, this might seem kind of unusual, but those traditional small wall switches require a little bit of a finger action. What's even worse is the guy that's in the lower side, where you have to read very tiny fine print and push a very specific button. Want to switch in these situations to these larger toggle type of switches that you see over here on the right, because those can be turned on and off with an elbow, a shoulder, almost any type of physical. I mean, you could bang your head into the switch and turn that on if you had to. Those are going to be the types of things that are going to be needed for this more universal situation. Think about how you're controlling the table lamps. You don't want to have that situation that requires a tiny amount of dexterity to turn that lamp on and off. So think about this very visible push button on the base of this lamp. Or if there's a floor lamp, think about how you might use these floor steps. This is a kind of a very cool thing. IKEA had this 3D printable product that they added to their items. So you can see this kind of paddle that's located here. Very easy to control. You can hit it with a fist. And what that does is it prevents you from having to find that tiny little switch on an item. Climate change, no surprise, we're in the midst of a climate change. And even if action, coming out of Glasgow this week is transformative, the nature of climate change means that improvements are going to take a long period of time. So we have to adapt. So, we're seeing more hurricanes in the Florida and the Gulf Coast, which is put into place things like hurricane rated homes and clustering trees. California is now seeing substantially, and the West. And the reason why we're in the middle of this virtual conference right now is because of fires. So there is going to be some ember resistant zones at a home that are going to be required as we move through that removal of wooden decks, low walls surrounding gardens that are all going to help prevent from fire damage. This is a home in a very fire-prone area built in Australia, where there is a stone base at the bottom of the house and corrugated metal on the siding of the house. This is a home in the historical part of Charleston, South Carolina. And this, because it's a flood plain, this entire house has been raised. So this stone area here was not at this house before. The front door was right here at the sidewalk level. And you know, in addition, they're using much more mold-resistant materials, and they're elevating their construction to meet these needs. Power failures are turning into a huge issue. The majority of the power grid was built in the 50s and the 60s. We have been forcing our public utilities commissions to keep our rates down. And because of that, most of the utility companies don't have the financial wherewithal to repair a lot of these things. So what we have is a whack-a-mole situation with power. And those current systems are operating at full capacity and over design. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, my goodness, they have potential disruptions in South Carolina, Arizona, New Mexico, Southern Texas, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and New England. They believe that these are vulnerable areas we're going to have, because America actually experiences an average of 6 hours of electrical disruption a year. North Carolina leads the nation with almost 30 hours. That's 5 times the national average. And number 2 on the list is actually Vermont. So they're twice as more likely to have that. So we need to have, because the United States is more likely to have power failures than any place else in the world, basically, the developed world. We need to have some solutions, and that's where resilient lighting comes in. So this resilient lighting is a concept where lighting is going to continue to function and allow us to shelter in place during these disruptions. It used to be, we think about this in exit signs, but it's not just exit signs any longer. It could be just general lighting. You see that cities are starting to install a lot of solar street lights, solar area lights, and even light bulbs are available with a battery backup. So this is something that we're going to all have to start thinking about because of this power failures. So, what does this basically mean for our residential lighting in the future? I think that in general, we're going to have a little bit less decorative, more functional lights. Doesn't mean we're going to have less lighting. It just means that we're going to be moving from less decorative pieces into more functional, more generic lighting is going to take its place. I think there's going to be a transition coming in bathroom mirrors. Bathroom vanity lighting, we've seen the things across the top or the sconces along the side. These are well over 50 years old. We haven't changed the design, where almost all other interior residential lighting has transitioned to some slightly different look, aside from obviously a chandelier. So I think we're going to see a much more elevated growth in what bathroom mirrors look like in the future. And we're going to probably see a little bit of a pushback to those surface-mounted recessed cans. They just simply don't have a look outside of new home construction. New home construction is probably going to keep them simply because all they're looking for is a reduction in costs. But these deeper recessed cans really are the solution because, again, we're trying to get rid of that glare. Much more LED tape in all kinds of areas. So make sure you're comfortable and flexible with how to use LED tape. And just as a way to kind of end this all, I'm going to give you a little idea of the trends that I think have overstayed their welcome. This modern farmhouse look, sorry, Chip and Joanne, it's pretty much overused. When you see this stuff in the dollar store, that it has hit the wall and it's done. Minimalism, this room, while I love this room still, I think it's a place that I could easily move into in a minute. This has had its day. Maximalism is coming. All neutral. I used to visit a store in New York that sold only beige furnishings. Everything in the store was beige. I noticed this last trip that it's now closed. So this all beige concept is disappearing, where people are looking for a little bit more interest. Mid-century modern had a good run. You're still going to see a whole lot of it on the market, but look for ways in which it has been updated. Look for this sophisticated Art Deco to kind of take that place of that a little bit more kinky, a little bit more interesting look. So today I shared with you information on demographics and what that customer base is going to be looking for. We talked about what home construction is where it seems to be heading. I talked about open floor plans, home offices, multiple master suites, quiet rooms, kitchens and pantries, residential exterior information, got into Casitas, gardens, winter gardens, pocket gardens, different trends in gardens, the tech that was coming around and we're going to be seeing. We talked about universal design, home health environment, and of course, a little bit of update and design. So with that, we'll see if there's any questions. In the meantime, I'll put my slide up here. I do write a bi-weekly blog at lightingbyjeffrey.com. So if you feel like it, you could sign up to get notice when I put a new blog up. And if you need to get in contact with me, that's my email address. But in the meantime, let's see if there's any questions.
Yeah, we did have some questions come in during the presentation. Simple to start, Karen wanted to know what kind of light you're using to illuminate your face right now.
Oh, so I have an LED, a dimmable LED table lamp that has a bendable arm. So under normal circumstances, it is aimed down on the work surface of the table, but the neck of it allows me to send it up. So I have it aimed straight forward at my face, but I've dimmed it down to about 50%. I also have got 2 table lamps that are at 45 degrees from me here. And there's also a window over there, but you'll notice nothing behind me.
Yes, it's effective.
Thanks.
Andrea says that she's enjoyed the presentation and she was wondering, any recommendations for aging eyes in terms of Kelvin, CRI, lumen amount, etc.? And how about placement for these lights? More important to come from above / overhead or lower, like eye level?
Yeah, so one of the things with aging eyes that you always have to be careful with, you have to be careful with glare. So anytime that you can hide that light, that is going to be your best approach. So for example, in a kitchen, under cabinet lights, lights over the top of the cabinet, lights at the toe kick, probably are going to be a lot more acceptable, a lot more comfortable for the aging eye than if you put in a series of recessed cans. In the past, they used to take the big fluorescent tubes and put 2 of them over the top of all the cabinets in older kitchens, and those were wonderful light for seniors. And now we've kind of transitioned to this recess. So if you're going to use recess, make sure you don't use those surface-mounted recess, those the little 3/4 or 1 inch. And I've even seen some that are very, very shallow that just sit on the surface of the ceiling. Those are all glare bombs. They're all going to be horrible. Make sure that your recessed cans are inset into the ceiling about 2.5 to 3 inches. I showed you one on one of these slides. I think that one was over 3 inches into the plenum. As far as color is concerned, I still love 2700 to 3000 Kelvin color temperature. I really don't use anything else in any of the designs that I do because I want the color of the light to complement the interior. Because seniors are going to have a much more difficult time with color perception because of the deterioration of the cornea on the front of the eye, you want to make sure that you're always using a high CRI. If you simply buy the product that's available to Californians, they have a minimum CRI of 90. That would be great. If you can't, if you're in some place that doesn't sell that particular product, then look for something that is in the high 80s or above CRI.
Okay, thank you. Someone asked, do you think it's going to become important to develop ways to move or conceal lighting to suit these multifunctional spaces that you've been talking about?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's the reason why I'm suggesting that there's going to be less decorative product. Doesn't mean decorative product disappears, but lighting that becomes a non-aesthetic portion of the home is going to be much more important than the decorative products. It's going to be, it might be in a tray ceiling, it might be hidden in the floor molding, it could be in a cove, could be above cabinets, could be underneath shelving, but all of those things are going to add all the light we need, but it's not going to be an aesthetic entity that's brought into that space. So I absolutely do think it's going to be necessary. Now, frankly, there's probably going to be more lighting product in a house. You're just not going to see it. It's going to be built into the architecture. And, someone's going to come in and they're going to put in their chandelier in the dining room. They're going to put some pendants over the island. And that's going to be all the lighting that they're going to want. They're going to need to add to a home.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another question here. Do you see a change in the color of light or light color preferences coming in the future?
Actually, I don't. What I think is going to ultimately happen, we are on the cusp of having really good quality circadian-based lighting. And I think what is more likely to happen, for those people who are really, really interested in it, I think we're going to have lighting that is going to transition or change through the day, kind of in accordance with the circadian needs of our system. So, our body has an internal clock, and that internal clock runs all types of functions inside. So if you think about what the sun delivers to us on a regular basis, day in and day out, we start our morning with a very white light. So we're somewhere in the morning, an average morning at about 3,000. We move up from 3,000 to midday, where we're at about 6,500, maybe 7,000 Kelvin, somewhere between 11 and 1 o'clock. And then we start transitioning back down. So as we get into 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we're somewhere around 4,000 Kelvin. And as we get into the evening, we're at 2,700 before we turn dark. That's what our body has been engineered to accept. It's engineered for our body to function in that way. There's lots of things that are happening inside our body that demand that type of color input. So I think as we start moving into the future and we start thinking about ways in which we might light our homes, we may not have that single color temperature coming into us. We may have this light that allows us to transition through the day. And when you turn on the light, it's going to be keyed in at that particular time. So if you turn a light on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's going to be at 4,000 Kelvin. If you turn it on at 8:30 at night, it's going to be very orange, so 2,700, 2,200 Kelvin. So I think that's going to be more likely. As far as our preference is concerned, I do see that there is a touch of a geographic preference right now. So, and you can do this geographically almost worldwide. People in Sweden have a tendency to demand light that is somewhere in the 5,000 Kelvin range. People in Florida, California, somewhere closer to that 4,000 Kelvin. But if you move north in the United States, we're much more comfortable with this 2,700. So I don't know that I'm seeing a ton of that right now.
Yeah. Okay. We had a couple more, but we're running really close on time
Sure.
here. I'm sure that you would be willing, if someone has something specific they wanted to talk to you about, they can email you at that email listed
Yeah,
here.
so here's my email address, bowtie.jeffrey, that's Jeffrey spelled correctly, Jeffrey at gmail.com. So be more than happy
Okay.
to help out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was a very informative presentation. We really appreciate you being here today.
Sure. Thanks a lot, everybody.